Okay, hello everybody. Thanks very much for joining. This is going to be a really good webinar, and we've had a lot of interest around the world to attend this one. Just while we're waiting for everyone to arrive, if you could use the chat, just let us know where you're dialing in from. It's always interesting for us to see where people are located and where the interest in the webinar is coming from. Thank you, South Africa. Great start for us. The usual things are set up here. We have Q&A available to put your questions in, and also the chat, and it's really helpful to take part in the chat and keep us engaged with what's going on. Debz and Amy will introduce themselves fully when they're doing their session, but what we wanted to do is just, because we know we've got some people who are new to SFIA, we wanted to have a few minutes just talking about the SFIA Foundation and the SFIA Framework in general, and then we'll hand over to the main event. In terms of the logistics, we are recording this, and we are planning to, once we've got the recording and the slides sorted after the event, share those as well. We also have a form which we'll send out at the end of the webinar. We'll send a link to it. And the reason for that is because there's so many people on the webinar, we haven't got the opportunity to open up for comments or questions using the microphone. And we also know that maybe some ideas and thoughts occur to people at the end of the event or past the event. So we want to make sure we've got the channels open for you to be able to ask some questions about what's being presented, and also if there's any about SFIA in general. So we're just trying to keep this as open as possible for us. So I think we could move to the next slide, Debz. So again, for people who are familiar with SFIA, you may be already aware, but this is just a very quick one. SFIA is a global not-for-profit foundation. It's used around the world, and we get a really good global representation and interest in SFIA. The aims of SFIA are, the purpose there is to enable capability within the global digital workforce. So SFIA is there as an enabling tool, and then the other four things are things we do to support that purpose. But it's a not-for-profit, and we rely on the goodwill and efforts of lots of volunteers to help us. And we also find it really valuable when users of SFIA, like the RAF today, are willing to spend their time and effort to talk about others about how they use that. That is one of those valuable contributions people can make. So a lot of thanks to Debz and Amy, who've made a great effort with this one. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of where SFIA is, we haven't got time to go into the detail, but we are very happy if after this event, people who are new to SFIA want to get in touch, so we can arrange some further sessions to do it. But the way to look at how SFIA is used is on the left-hand side is what industry, what employers of all sizes and shapes are interested in doing with their people and how they work with skills. And then in order to do that, what practice and history has shown us around since the time SFIA has been around is that you really need to have in place some systematic approach around how you do that. And one of the things that's really helps you have that systematic approach is to have a framework around skills, and that really helps underpin what you're doing. And the fact that SFIA has been around and it's been tried and tested over more than 20 years and is constantly updated means it's a really trusted resource that can be used to support you in that in your endeavours and efforts in that space. And then if you press the button again, Amy, sorry, Debz. So what we have, and you'll see some really interesting stuff on this webinar in terms of using generative AI to help make use of SFIA and other resources. And what we're seeing is that the interest in using generative AI and using it with a trusted and reliable resource like SFIA gives a much more powerful solution than the sort of hopeful, opportunistic aim of just using generative AI, ChatGPT and the like without that trusted resource. Next steps, next one. And been around for 24 years. It's refreshed every 3 years. We work with industry, we get collaborations around the world in terms of what we put into SFIA and update it. SFIA 9 has just been launched, and that's been really well received. So if you're not familiar with SFIA 9, take a look at that. If you're not familiar with SFIA, you can start a SFIA now, and there's no need to go back and look at the previous versions. And why SFIA has been so well used is people find it just useful and usable, and that's the focus, is to make it something that's useful and usable. We have an engaged global community. Today will be a good example of that, and the fact it's got a track record, people know it's updated and available, so they can use it with confidence. In the early days, it may have been, well, we don't know whether this will be around, but with a consistent track record of being updated, you can be confident that it is around and reusable, and the community will be listening to any ideas to improve and update it. I think this is the last one. Here we are. So this very colourful slide. As SFIA has grown, what started as a framework focused mainly on IT, mainstream IT, has grown, and we have a lot more skills within the framework. We have a lot more guidance, and we have a lot more ways of viewing what's in the framework. And you'll recognise on this screen lots of the new developments and the new uses, and as digital has spread from being an IT type thing to being a far more business oriented, and different sectors all transform into use digital tools, and not least, of course, for people on this audience, is around cybersecurity and information security. And we've done a lot of work in positioning the existing skills in SFIA and new ones to support that area. So without any more, I'll hand over to Debz and Amy. Just before we start, please keep the questions coming. Please keep the chat engaged with us. That's really helpful.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Hopefully that's my comms are working and I'm not just talking to the screen. So I'll got a thumbs up.
Yes.
So that's good start. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. We're really excited to be able to share the journey that we've done with SFIA over the last year. So yeah, we're really engaged, open to questions. Please do let us know, and if we can't get through to everything, we will endeavour to get back to you as best we can. So my name's Amy. I'm joined by my colleague Debz. Between us today, if we go to the next slide, please. We will cover off the below points. So we are military, so we have to put a scope slide in at the start of everything. So we'll start off with a bit of an introduction to who we are, what cyberspace is for the RAF, and a bit of problem overview. Talk about where we wanted to get to, our plan for how we get there. Then Debz is going to talk you through the bulk of what we actually did to implement that plan, and then we'll finish with some recommendations that we've taken away from our lessons learned for anybody else looking to do a similar journey, and then finish on our really quite early on benefits, because we are very early on in this process, but some of the quick wins and early results that we've seen from this process, and then we'll finish hopefully with a bit of a Q&A. So to start then, what do we mean by RAF Cyberspace? So this is probably one of our biggest challenges, is what we actually do, because we are really broad. Lots of the time people hear cyberspace and they just focus on the cyber part, which isn't a true reflection of everything we do. We are much broader than that. So I've put these pillars at the bottom of build, secure, manage, develop, and exploit. And that summarizes everything we do in terms of the network. So we have people that physically go up and install antenna systems and put in all the infrastructure, people that then manage and protect those networks, and then people that then work in the exploit space to generate effects from that. So we're a really broad profession, and it encompasses every part of the network, which adds to the challenge of then trying to map everybody. In terms of how the RAF is structured, we're currently structured into professions, with every profession having head of profession. The team that myself and Debz belong to manage the profession on behalf of the head and carry out the day-to-day running. And our team specifically focuses on the implementing of this framework and pivoting to a skill-based organisation, which I'll come on to. Debz, did you want to add anything about your background?
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Amy. So my name's Debz Roberts. I've been in the RAF for 21 years now, in cyberspace for that entire time, throughout its whole sort of maturing as we've gone through the ages and technology has advanced. I've been part of all of that, and I've been employed in a lot of the different pillars that we have within cyberspace. As Amy said, it's a very diverse area to work within, because you could be outside installing things in pits and ducts all the way to the cyber elements and then the more digital elements as well. But I will speak to you more in a few slides time.
I think before we move on, if anyone is more interested in understanding more about cyberspace, I'll do a shameless plug for the podcast that Debz recorded earlier in the year. It's Inside Air. I'm sure we can get a link out to that if anyone's interested later after this. Next slide, please. So then to start then with a bit of why we've started this journey with SFIA and a bit of a problem overview. So talking from a sort of whole force perspective, the RAF now is much smaller than it's ever been before. So if you go back to sort of the 1950s, the force was probably around 250,000 people. Today we're about 30,000. So we're much smaller, and that leads to us having to become more agile and more efficient in how we work. And that's common for every part of every part of the RAF, and then us specifically, that is sort of exacerbated by the huge technological advance that we've seen over the last sort of 60 years. So I thought the pictures at the bottom paint a really good narrative for that. So you've got both taken RAF Marham in the 1950s. They're flying Mosquitoes. I don't want to knock them for any aircraft enthusiasts. They're very good aeroplanes, but they could be built in about 2 weeks in a piano factory, versus now in an F-35, and you've got it's probably about 18 months time to build it. So the technology has advanced hugely, and this sort of driver anyway to become more agile and efficient is a huge opportunity for us to take steps to future-proof our workforce and build a really skill-focused organization that's able to keep up with the rapid advances in technology. So specifically what this problem meant, if we could go to the next slide, please. We've got transforming at scale. So in order to be considered a profession, so we were previously structured in branches and trades, which were quite restrictive in how people could be employed. So you could only be employed essentially in the job that you've joined to do. Whereas now in professions, there's more scope for people to upskill and move between different perhaps specializations and what they initially joined as, or that's the ambition. So to get to that point, you have to graduate as a profession, and what that means for us is we have to meet 121 distinct conditions, and that's not just to do with building a skills framework. It spans all those pillars at the bottom of recruit, select, train, sustain, retain, resettle. So there's a huge amount of work, and it touches kind of every part of the organization. I don't think there's sort of a single area that we haven't looked at as part of this project. The challenge for us as well is we're quite a big profession. We've got about 3,000 people, and they're located across 4 different continents. So that sort of adds to the challenge of finding out what people do, getting in touch with people, working through different time zones. You then add into the fact of multiple governmental and external stakeholders. So there's a huge amount of work. It's really broad. There's lots of people to do this for. So everything is kind of on a times 3,000 scale. And the scariest part was that we had 9 months to deliver. So that led to us having to do quite a plan in quite a short space of time and get that planning done to be able to work out how we would meet all these deliverables. So if I go to the next slide, please. We had a head start on all this, and what made this achievable is the fact that we did choose to use SFIA. So if there are any Royal Signals people on the call that worked on the Caduceus project, we kind of took the lessons learned from you and identified that SFIA would be the most appropriate framework for the RAF Cyberspace Profession as well. So so why did we choose SFIA? So as this call is evidence of, it's a global framework. Everybody's using it, and I think in the military in particular, we sometimes struggle to articulate exactly what it is we do. So SFIA provides a common lexicon that we can use across industry, across different stakeholders in different countries, where we can all come to a sort of a common understanding of what it is we do. And that's been really good, especially for us working with sort of reserve forces, where we are having to go out and work with industry and being in a more whole force environment. SFIA gives us this really well understood framework that can articulate what skills it is that we need. And for us starting this project and having such a short timeline to meet, that was a huge advantage, because it meant that we weren't starting from scratch. We had a lot of really good work and a lot of years of experience to build from. And I think specifically for the RAF as well, this isn't an alien framework. It's something that we've been using for a long time, perhaps not as formally as what we are now, but it's definitely been something that lots of people are aware of, so they understand it well. So our plan for how we do this, we kind of broke it into these key enabling objectives, and that was developing generic role profiles, which Debz will come on to, mapping SFIA skills to the generic roles and how we decided the most appropriate. What was really important throughout was validating all of this work. So we've got a team that's got quite a lot of experience, but we can't talk for 3,000 people. So going out to SMEs was really important. We wanted to complete the position to framework mapping. So how do we then map jobs to it? And that was again a lesson we learned from the Royal Signals, is splitting out mapping jobs and mapping people as two separate tasks. We then mapped training into our framework, and then in the background to all of this, we had to do a huge amount of enabling administrative updates as well. So I think the next slide is, we had to redact some of the details, but this is our campaign plan really of how we would meet all these conditions in a short space of time. So you can see there that we've split it into kind of 6 key work streams, and that was really good for splitting out the work and sort of enabling a mission command approach of letting team members run with distinct phases of the project. And then we split it into those 3 phases of phase 1, 2, and 3. Really, sort of this time last year, we were in phase 1, and that was all about planning. Phase 2 was about doing sort of the data or going out and validating everything that we'd done and engaging with SMEs. And then phase 3 was about getting all that data uploaded into our HR systems to make it credible and usable. So I think the project governance work stream is probably the most important part of that throughout, has been comms. I know Debz is going to talk about that a lot, but at all points of the project, we tried to communicate with as many stakeholders as possible and as openly as possible. And that's been really good for getting engagement. The skills framework side, obviously that was having to make SFIA usable for the RAF and moulding it to be in a way that worked for our organisation. And then as well with that, it was also putting in place all the governance structures around the framework and the awarding of skills. Career management was about mapping jobs to the framework, doing the enabling updates to policy to be reflective of what we were doing, and mapping or starting to map people. Obviously, the HR system is based around getting all that data in a way that's usable for your organisation. And then recruitment naturally is updating recruitment materials to be reflective of the move. And then training was about making sure that when people complete training, we're aware of what skills or knowledge of skills that they gain throughout that training course. So I think I'm about to hand over to Debz, who's going to talk about how we put all this into practice.
I'll just raise a question. You don't need to answer it now, but maybe put it in the back of your head for later on, from IO, which is saying, have you got a rough estimate of the number of hours that was being invested in the inventory and implementation of SFIA? I'll leave that with you, and you can.
All I've got at the moment is lots, but we can.
Yes.
We'll try and work it out at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
Pass it over to Debz.
Thank you very much. And so hopefully I'll actually be able to give a little bit of insight into the answer to that question as I go through the next part. So phase 1, as you've just seen on the campaign plan, was all about our planning. It was incredibly important that as we went through our planning phase and we started to gather our information, that we started with the strongest foundations possible. So therefore, when we were going through phase 1, we did a lot of critical analysis of what the actual task at hand was. We knew we only had 9 months to do it in, and we knew we had to be incredibly smart with the approach that we took to be able to achieve everything we needed to achieve. And the people that we had to present this to at the end of the project was the Chief of Air Staff. So, we didn't have anywhere to hide. So we knew we had to do everything incredibly efficiently and accurately. So one of the first things we did as we gathered information was we looked at actually what is cyberspace. And as you saw from what Amy said earlier on, we're incredibly broad. We're a very diverse profession to be employed within. But like all organisations, we have something called the role performance statement, which tells you exactly what you expect of somebody working within cyberspace. We have about 89 of them. and they were all very big documents, but that was really advantageous because that gave us everything that we needed to know. We knew that as long as we hit everything within those 89 documents, actually we were dancing. And we already had agreed as a team and as a profession that SFIA was the way forward. It fitted everything that we needed to be fit. So it was perfect. So we gathered our information. We then reached out to Ian and Peter very early on in the process just to introduce ourselves, let them know what we were doing, and just to see what they thought about our approach to implementing a skills framework. And forging those relationships early on was incredibly beneficial to us, because not only did it allow us to speak to two SFIA experts, but it also helped to validate our own information and our own processes going forward, which was really helpful. So the next thing that we did was we decided that to make it work as quickly and efficiently as possible is that we would use AI to speed things along. So because we had our role performance statements which said this is cyberspace, and we had SFIA, we went to a company and we asked them to create a mapping of what is cyberspace. So this is my role performance space, our role performance statements. This is what cyberspace looks like versus this is the SFIA skills framework. And we said to ChatGPT, we said, if this is what cyberspace looks like, could you please look through the SFIA framework and tell us what skills align to what? We did give the AI apologies, we did give AI a little bit more of a steer because there are so many employment areas within cyberspace. We told them roughly what employment areas we have. And so we call those generic roles. So we said, if these are our generic roles, can you map the skills to the generic roles accurately, please? And then we put in a little few statements to make sure that there was no biases contained within the seed data. And these were things like, if you think that SFIA doesn't have a skill which matches something that we need, can you articulate that? If you think another framework holds that information, can you let us know? If we need to write something, can you let us know? We did 3 passes of data through AI. The first one came back and we tightened up our parameters. We did a second pass. Again, it looked good, but we knew that we wanted to titivate a few things. And then on the third pass of information, we actually got a really good output. It was about 90% accurate, which is quite good. Anybody who's worked with AI and has tried to do mapping before knows that that's actually a really good result. So what would happen after that point is we used the AI. We spent about 2 weeks using artificial intelligence to match those data and do the runs and make sure that the data that we were pushing in was as accurate as possible. And then when we got the third pass through, we sat down as a team. In fact, we did this after every pass, but the third pass was critical. We sat down as a team. We had 8 hours around a table. We had lots of biscuits and cups of tea. And we pulled apart everything that the AI had pushed out to us. And we made sure that when the AI had used a particular skill, were we happy with that? Was the 2 skills that we thought were similar? Which one would we prefer as the human element? And that was incredibly important. And validating it as ourselves as a team of experts who'd come in to manage the project was really helpful, not only to make sure that the data was accurate, but also really helpful for our team to truly embrace SFIA and what it could bring to our organisation. So we'd put the generic roles into AI, it'd give some good data back, and I'll show you an example of what that looks like in a second. And then we also asked AI to write our skill standards. So we knew we were going to use SFIA, but we had to use it in a way which worked for the military. And SFIA lends itself really well to that. So we give AI a few rules of, if this is how we work in the military, could you write this skill in this way, please, whilst maintaining accuracy to SFIA? So it did that. And again, I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. And then again, my team, we validated all that information. So let me just show you an example of what a generic role would look like. So the first thing we asked the AI to do was, this is what we think our generic role should look like. Can you give us 10 SFIA skills that align to that generic role, please? So the generic role I'm showing you right now is called application support. And what we wanted AI to do is give us a generic description of what somebody within application support should do. And we asked it not to concentrate too much on rank or position. It was just more of a generic understanding of somebody within this domain would do this type of stuff. So the first bullet point there is investigating and resolving issues reported by users. Now that could be from somebody doing first line technical support who's getting the call in, all the way up to the supervisor who might be doing problem management, or then to the manager who might be more involved in the incident management space. So AI helped us do that, and then most importantly helped to match 10 skills from the SFIA framework into what application support should have. So they did that. This was all validated by other people post us, but that was in phase 2, and I'll show you what that looked like in a little bit. But this is actually a live example of what application support looks like. This has been validated by my team, our project team, and it's also been validated by line managers who are out actually doing these types of roles, and by experts who are also the worker bees who are doing all the jobs on the floor plate as well. So the benefits of using AI meant that instead of spending 4 months just reading through raw performance statements and then scouring the SFIA framework to see what would match where and to make sure that we'd aligned everything correctly, it meant we could do that data pass in about 2 weeks. So not only did it reduce the size of my project team, and it meant that we could do this work with 6 people only, it also meant that we saved a lot of time, which allowed us to spend more time validating and then more time building really robust processes to allow other people to interact with the framework later on. So it saved us a lot of time. But I would say that whilst AI was incredibly important to us being able to work quickly and efficiently, I think the critical point was we put in really robust data. So we had our raw performance statements, we had the SFIA framework, and we said to AI, this is exactly what you need to look at. And every time that we did our passes, pass 1, 2, and 3, we just type. Excuse me, it's a very cold morning in England this morning. Every time we put a new pass through, we would just tighten up our parameters a little bit to make sure that it was as accurate as could be. So the benefits to using AI was that it helped us to be really quick. Other people tried to copy the same process, but without the robust data, they weren't quite as successful. So I would say if anyone's going to do it in the future, the seed data that you put in to feed that machine is absolutely critical. And the tighter that you can be with your data being pushed in, the better it will push out. And then the second part of that would be having a team of people, 6 people who were cyberspace experts, and we had probably 150 years worth of experience in that room, was critical to making sure that it actually worked properly. It also allowed us to keep a really good audit trail. So we've kept every single trail of data that we had back through the AI, and we've kept that as our sort of historical document set as well. So at this point now, we had a really good set of data from AI. As a team, we had looked at it. And then the next thing that we had to do was we had to consider what the military wanted. So we knew that we were working on behalf of cyberspace, and cyberspace were very happy with what we were doing at this point. But we also knew we had to make this as workable as possible for a military force. And we also knew that we had to work well with our colleagues in the Army and in the Navy and in the civil service. Within Defence, there's an organisation called the Pan Defence Skills Framework Team. And the Pan Defence team, they are creating a skills framework for the entirety of defence. So when we started our work and we knew that somebody was doing this on behalf of defence as well, we also reached out to those guys and we said, you know, this is what we're going to do in cyberspace. Can you give us your rule set of what you would like from people, please? And then when we create our skills, we actually know that not only are we aligning to SFIA as an industry standard, not only are we giving our people within cyberspace a really good framework to use, but actually we're going to future-proof it by following the rules set out by the Pan Defence team. So the Pan Defence team, you can see on screen here, they work, their rule is if you create a skill, what you need to articulate is what knowledge, skills, experience and behaviours somebody should have in order to demonstrate that they have that skill. We were like, not a problem. So that was fine. We knew that we could create that within our skill standards. And the other thing that we considered was SFIA has 7 proficiency levels per skill. Now we know that not all 7 proficiency levels for each skill are used. That's absolutely fine. But within cyberspace, in order to make this as workable as possible to a force who is deploying and who's incredibly busy, we decided that we would have 4 proficiency levels. As you can see here, where SFIA has follow and assist as their first 2 levels, we created awareness. Now, awareness is a word that was pushed upon us. That's not the word that we would necessarily have used, but that was a word that we were encouraged to use by the Pan Defence Skills Framework team. Absolutely fine. We're not going to lose any sleep over that. But as you can see here, awareness here looks at follow and assist levels from SFIA. Practitioner looks at apply and enable. Senior practitioner is ensure and advise, and expert is initiate and influence and set strategy. And we knew within each one of our 4 levels, we would create the KSEP. That's what we like to call it because we love an acronym in the military. So we have knowledge, skills, experience, and behaviors. And I'll show you right now how we did that. So this is the information security skill. We've got the SFIA description there at the top. And then we've got our 4 proficiency levels. And underneath each level, we've articulated what knowledge, skill, experience, and behavior someone has to demonstrate in order to be able to achieve that skill. It's worth noting at this point that we have 2 full-time skills managers who every time somebody applies for a skill, one of them's just waved at me across the room, every time somebody applies for a skill, they will apply to our skills managers who are the quality check, and they are the police of this framework. So they make sure that this KSEP is being followed by all people, all 3,000 of our people. But importantly for this call in particular is where each of where we've got 4 proficiency levels instead of 7, and where we've renamed them, you can see at the bottom here, we've put a corresponding competency framework tile, which shows you that actually awareness for information security in the RAF actually equates to SFIA 8 information security level 3. And what we did at each point was any time that we did anything, we would always correlate it back to what the SFIA framework said. And that was our critical backbone. We needed the credibility to remain. So up until this point, everything that we had been done in team. And then now I'm going to talk to you about phase 2. Phase 2 was critical to making sure that our product was credible for the 3,000 people that were going to be using it. This was all about creating strong working relationships with the people that were working on behalf of our 3,000 colleagues. It was about making sure that we were presenting correctly for our head of profession, the 2-star who's in charge of us. This looked at working with industry partners, professional institutes, Ian and Peter, the Army, the Navy, the Pan Defence Skills Framework team, the civil service. So at this point, we just talked for about 4 months, and Amy can probably nod along and agree to that. We also worked with our reserve forces. So I know that John Nicholson's on this call this morning. Hiya, John. To make sure that what we were planning actually worked for the reserve forces as well. And at this point, all of the work that we'd done previously, which had taken about 4 months, we created our generic roles, we created our skills. The scary part was now we were about to let this loose to everybody and ask them to actually validate the work that we'd done. So I will show you what that looks like. We created a process. Now, because we'd created generic roles, we created 26 generic roles to cover the different areas of employment in cyberspace. We created them, and then what we did was we reached out to line managers and supervisors who worked within those particular types of roles. And at this point, we'd already mapped all 3,000 jobs into the 26 generic roles. So we would reach out to people and we would say, this is how we've mapped you. Are you happy? You've been mapped into application support. And they would say, yeah, Debz, that's perfect. Thank you very much. Brilliant. And at that point, we would say, could you help us validate the application support role? And generally, I don't think we had anybody who said no. Actually, people were really invested. This affected them and we were making them part of the change. So they would say generally, yes, I can, or can you come back to me in 2 weeks? I'm a bit busy. And it was fine. So the first thing we did was we contacted people. We had really robust conversations with them about what we wanted them to do. And then we give them a lot of information about this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and this is how we've done it. The job role owner would read through the role description. So what you saw previously with our example, they would read through that role description and they would agree or disagree to what that looked like. If they disagreed, we would ask them to put comments on a formal application form that we created for them. And then we would address those comments with a second job owner. If they agreed, again, we would add their comments. They would sign to say, yeah, I agree that this role works fine. And then once they'd done that, we would ask them to agree to the 10 skills that we had mapped to their generic role. And you can see we're following these steps. So we've contacted the job role owners. We've said to them, are you happy with what this looks like? Yes, I am. If they're happy with the 10 skills that we've appointed, we would then say to them, can you give us 2 or 3 subject matter experts? So if I say SME, I mean a subject matter expert. Give us 3 experts who can actually then validate the skills for us. You're really good at validating the job, but we actually need the people doing the jobs to validate the skills. So they would give us 2 or 3 people. They would then go through the skills for us, and I'll show you what their process looks like in a little while. Our job role owner would confirm that they were happy with everything that had happened on their form. Any changes that they'd asked to be made would be made in consultation with other people, and then they would come back to us and we would validate the process and everything that they'd gone through. And here is a copy of the letter that we would send out to people. So we would tell them exactly what the aim was, their responsibilities, everything that they needed to do. And off the next role, the next page to this, which I've not put in the presentation, but I can share with people if they need it, was are you happy with this? Can you write your comments here, X, Y, and Z? So once they'd done that and they'd given us 2 or 3 experts to validate everything else that they needed to do, this was the process that we followed. So we would go to the SMEs and we would say to them, you've been nominated for this. First of all, are you happy? You know, sometimes line managers can say this person's really great, go and speak to them. And if they were happy, we would give them a 45-minute mentoring session where we would teach them exactly how to do a skill author. And then they would go ahead and they would go and do the work. Now, often what would happen is people would say, I don't need 45 minutes, I get it, I'm clever. And they would just get on with it. And a lot of the time it was really easy like that. Sometimes if people needed more mentoring, we would actually just go to their unit and visit them and go and show them exactly how to do that. Once they'd done that, it would come back to our experts and team who would just make sure that it was written in the correct format, and then we would publish it. So here's an overview of the 26 generic roles that we have within cyberspace. I have redacted some information because some of it is classified, but that's an example of the types of areas that we work within. So we have 26 roles, and then on the next screen, you will see that we have 65 skills. Now, there's a lot more skills within the SFIA framework, and hopefully you will see that the vast majority of skills on here out of the 65 actually come from SFIA. Some of them are in Lilac. So the 3 that are in Lilac are ones that SFIA didn't have at the time that we were drafting our skills. So we wrote those ourselves, radar system management, for example, working at height where we're doing high risk activities very high up in the air. They weren't contained, so we wrote them ourselves. You might notice as well that some of these are named in a way that you might not expect them to. We've actually had to change them from the SFIA naming. So skill number 20, for example, digital incident management. Within SFIA, that is just incident management. But because we're working in a defense environment, incident management could have a lot of different actions. And for example, the police would do incident management. Chefs might do incident management. And a lot of other people said, actually, incident management's not just an IT skill. So we said, not a problem, we'll change it to digital incident management. We all know what that means. And the other people who don't do digital don't have to be too confused about that. So now I'm going to pass over to Amy, who's going to talk to you about the phase 3 work.
Okay, thank you, Debs. So this phase was looking at how we got to our graduation point. So it focused on mapping our job roles, mapping training, looking at how we mapped individuals, and then the actual creation of the skill framework document and the quality systems that go around that, and then looking at how the career pathway. So we'll talk more about the job role mapping and individuals in a second, but the 2 points I wanted to pick up on here are that the framework document, we knew that needed to be really usable and interactive for people, and that was something that we were really aware of as we're going about this whole process. Like, the skills could be amazing, they could be the best skills ever written, but if people have to trawl through a 120-page PDF document, they won't use them. So part of that is that we created an interactive PDF, which I think was really good for getting people to engage in the framework and start looking through it. It's a nice document to use. So the whole sort of user experience was really important in this particular phase. And then around that, I mentioned earlier, all this is quite a new concept, I think, for defence and working with skills. So we had to start looking at our quality systems as well and defining that. So I think coming from sort of an engineering background, that was something that we were really aware of all the way through, is that we wanted the skill award to be really fair and a credible process. So putting in that sort of quality system was really important. And then the career pathways. So one of the key benefits for individuals in all of this is that they sort of become masters of their own destiny a bit more, and they have much more transparency about how their career could work and their own development. So obviously we're always going to be in the military, so service need will always be a thing. You can't always get exactly what you want. However, having these career pathways, it gives people much greater opportunity to kind of have a golden thread to their career and be able to sort of have a better negotiating position, and probably as well greater awareness about what other roles are out there that are doing similar things, because it's quite easy to become siloed, I think. So this gives people a way of understanding what their transferable skills are within the military as well as potentially externally as well. So if I go to job role mapping, then the next one, please. So position mapping, I think, is something that we've not necessarily talked about up to this point, but it's been something we've been really aware of all the way through. So right back at the very beginning at phase 1, we did a bit of a stress test on our generic roles to make sure they actually captured the breadth of our profession. So the way we did that was we had the 2 weeks worth of work, I think, and we reviewed every single job description and job spec within the profession and mapped it into one of those generic roles. And then from that, we were able to work out which ones were working, which ones weren't, merge some, add some new ones, etc. And that was great, but I'm sure it will be a pain experienced by many on the call. Job descriptions aren't always up to date and accurate. So we knew that the accuracy of this data was probably going to not be totally correct anyway, and we didn't want to start this data upload based on data that we knew was definitely going to be flawed. So from that, we wanted to have a mechanism to do a bit of a quality check on that initial data capture that we did. So what we ended up doing was creating a Power App, which was essentially an Excel spreadsheet with an easy-to-use user interface where we could ask the job role owners, which we knew quite a lot of from doing the initial validation work, to go in and check which generic role we had mapped their jobs that they were responsible for to. And they could either agree with that or disagree and map themselves into a different generic role. One of the things we picked up quite early on in our pilots was that we knew people would say the generic role's about right, but perhaps not all these skills are relevant. Like some are, but not everything within that generic role spec is relevant for this job. And we knew that was going to happen because by nature of it was a generic role. So we wanted to give people the opportunity to pick which ones were relevant, but still within the left and right of arc of these are the ones that are associated with this generic role. So we would allow job role owners to pick which the 5 most essential skills which were essential for their jobs within their area of responsibility. And I think, as we've said repeatedly, I think in this call, that we didn't need it to be absolutely perfect, and we didn't need it to be totally complete, but we were really concerned that what we produced for our first sort of step out the door was accurate and correct. So that was why we sort of limited it to those 5 skills initially. And then by doing it this way and giving people the guidance of the generic roles and sort of scoping what skills they could select from, it then meant that we were able to do a bit of standardization work within our team, so that you would expect that similar roles have similar skill sets, which I think to get any sort of organizational benefit going forward, it's really important that you've got some kind of what good looks like. And that was important for us early on. And I think one of the sort of second and third order effects that we didn't necessarily anticipate but was really beneficial was the fact that by allowing people to get involved in the change, it really increased engagement, because we got people to actually have to do something. It got a lot of buy-in, and people then sort of engaged with us really well. And we had drop-in clinics, and it was when we sort of launched this Power App and people could get their hands on things that they actually started attending these drop-in clinics to come and ask questions. So that was really good for the position mapping. So as I said, I think again at the beginning of the slide, we learned a lot of lessons from the Caduceus team that did this work. They're kind of sort of the pioneers, I guess, for across defence, and their lessons learned split out mapping positions and mapping people. It was if you try and do it at the same time, it gets really confusing and it's a lot more work. So we mapped the positions first, and then going forward, if we go to the next slide, we're starting to look at mapping people. So to get to our graduation point of meeting our foundation, we did a baseline of people's skills based on their training background. So we created sort of skill profiles based on training, and we mapped our current specialization training to SFIA, and then awarded skills at the sort of lowest proficiency levels just to get people going and have a basic skills profile going forward. And then now we're sort of launched our framework, and we're moving forward with this, and we're looking at how we map individuals comprehensively. We've come up with this process. Again, we've got a tool that's got a nice user interface, but this is sort of the raw data that we're going to collect from, and essentially it will be a star format as the bulk of the evidence. And the reason we picked this is it aligns really well to professional registration. So particularly if anyone's looked at the new CITP standard, this is almost exactly how the CITP standard is going for collecting evidence. So it's a proven and credible method. And for our profession, there are lots of people that do the professional registration side. So it's something that's easily understood already, and we've not got to spend a long time going out and educating people how to do it. It's something they're familiar with. So that was our plan going forward, is to collect the evidence, and again they can submit additional like courses and certifications that they've done to support their application, and that again goes through to our skill managers who will verify and validate that. So then the next slide then, I think, is our recommendations. So I think Debz is going to do the first couple.
Thank you, Amy. So it's exactly what it says on the slide. The first recommendation that we have is just get on with it. We only had 9 months to be able to do this job, and initially when we first came in, it was a very punchy timeline, but I think if we'd have taken 9 months or 5 years, we would have followed the exact same process. But if you have 5 years, you would take 5 years. So 9 months, although it was really a short amount of time, it allowed us to really look at smart ways of working. So we innovated, we used AI, but we didn't, we kept track of the fact that the human element to using AI was just as critical as how quick AI could make our work. And we used it smartly. We also collaborated. We collaborated with Ian and Peter, and we collaborated with pan government teams. But innovation was definitely our key that helped us just to get on with it. The way that your framework will be successful is when people get their hands on it. And so SFIA made it really easy for us. It was really moldable to what we needed in the RAF. We could change little bits here and there to fit what we needed it to do, and that was absolutely fine. And SFIA is really good for that. That was the huge benefit of using it. But we knew that when you're creating it, when it's conceptual and you're creating it and you're getting it validated, that's all great. But it really matures and it really grows once people get their hands on it. So at the minute, we've got 65 skills. We made it manageable. Like Amy said, we didn't want to overwhelm people. We didn't want it to become too complicated for people. So we've started really short, like small and safe for people with 65 skills. That will mature and it'll grow as our people use it, as they start to get used to using a skills framework. So just get down, don't overthink it. Create something small that works, and then allow your people to help you to grow with it. That is the biggest piece of advice that I can have, because doing that is really helpful to make it not overwhelming for the people who are going to actually be using it, and not overwhelming for the people in the project team who have to create something. The next recommendation was communications. So we acknowledged very early on in the project that change can be difficult for people. So we took the approach that what we would do is we would do this change with people, and we wouldn't just do it to them, which would be a really easy thing to do. So that included things like getting people in to come and validate our stuff. We gave the mic over to those people. What do you want to see? Is this right? Are you happy with this? Would you like to change anything? And the other thing that we did in the way of communications was We did station visits. We're in the military, so we've got lots of stations about the UK and overseas. So we did a lot of station visits. We spent a lot of time on the road, going to travel and speak to people, reassure them, hear their concerns, hear their ideas, their suggestions. We had Teams dial-ins, like things like this. But what we did is we did it with rank base. So we would separate our ranks out to give them a safe forum to be able to talk in. And you also find that people on the floor plate doing a job will have an entirely different focus area to our managers, who have a completely different focus area. So that was really helpful. We created we created an ambassador program to allow people to be ambassadors of this change, and they would go out and they would help control the T-bar chat and help us with the rumour mill of what things were happening. And then we did things like the podcast. We really tried to get out there as much as we possibly could and talk to people, and that has helped us immeasurably, because with this program, we've had something called an offer to transfer. So people can opt into doing the skills framework, and we've had an overwhelming positive uptake from people within the profession who want to be able to do that. And then out of profession, our reserve forces within our profession, I mentioned John on the call earlier. We spoke really quite a lot with them to make sure that what we were doing also worked for our reserve forces as well. So communication up, down, left, right, everywhere was incredibly important to make people part of this change. And now I'll pass over to Amy, who's going to talk about the collaborations that we had along the way.
So yeah, so I think part of this process is we wanted to be really open about what we're doing. And I think early on, someone said to us, one of our difficult questions was, how are you actually being credible? What are you doing to make sure that this is correct? Because no one else is sort of doing this in defence, or everybody's doing it at the same time in defence. So there's kind of established governance structures aren't in place yet. So we really wanted to make sure that what we were doing was credible and we were doing it correctly. So that was why we engaged early on with the SFIA Foundation, also with professional engineering institutes, trying to sort of publicise what we were doing externally, and that led to us making some really great connections and being able to sort of work out our place within the wider UK IT sector, and that's been great. And I think we've managed to try and share what we're doing. Some of it's best practice. We've definitely taken lots of lessons learned from other people externally. So I think being open, especially going through the SFIA Foundation, I think Peter and Ian put us in touch with quite a few people that we were able to talk to that had done similar projects, and we were able to sort of cherry pick the best approaches. So I think collaboration has been a really key part, and being open, and it's been great meeting all these people along the way as well. So I think just to finish, and then we've got probably a couple of minutes for questions. These are just our really early benefits that we've got from this approach. So first one being professionalisation. The whole point of this project, I think, is to become professional. So having the alignment to SFIA and being able to articulate what it is that we do in SFIA skills has been great for opening up more professional registration opportunities, and giving people pathways to getting professional registration. So, and in terms of fostering motivated and professional people, it's been excellent for that, and also for explaining to people how best to do their own CPD. So then sort of talent management and sector alignment sort of tying together. This has been immediately beneficial to how we employ reserve forces. So part of our reserves is we've got a specialist group from industry, being able to map them to SFIA and sort of task map them as well, and match them to the most appropriate job has been really great for making sure people are employed correctly and we're making the best use of the resources that we have available. And then sort of the last couple of sort of transferable skills. So I think today from doing this project, I've certainly learned that job security now isn't about always being in the same employer for life. It's about feeling like you've always got the skills to be employed. So having these skill sets in place, and showing people their career pathways and explaining how they can develop and progress has been really good, for giving people that sense of ownership of their own career, and showing all the opportunities that are available in a really easy to understand way. And then lateral entry, so being able to explain what we need in terms of skills as opposed to maybe academic qualifications, which we've done previously, has been good for sort of the early days of doing lateral moves and lateral entry within the RAF and into civilian sectors as well. So that opens up doorways for providing bespoke training pathways, and as I've mentioned again, the reserve forces as well. So I think we've finished there, and we've probably got about 5 minutes for a couple of questions.
Okay, so let's try and pick up the questions we've got in the chat, and thanks for everyone for your comments and supportive comments in there. It's really appreciated. And you've answered some of the questions already as you've gone through, which is fantastic. So going back to your mapping of SFIA skills to the awareness practitioner scale. So there's a couple of questions related to that. Patricia was asking, you mentioned you didn't like the word awareness, so some alternative that you would have preferred to use, if you can remember that back.
That was an incredibly long time ago. We did have other words. I can't remember them now. I think we got to a point where actually, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, it just wasn't an important part. Like, my feelings of the word awareness just wasn't important enough to labour over when we had so much more important things to do. I'll try and have a think, because it's probably in a notepad somewhere. I've gone through about 20 notepads in this job, so I'll have a look through and I will try and get back to you on that. Okay.
And Io, eagle-eyed, I think Io's question was around the fact you picked up a one-to-many matching of like level 1 and 2 to awareness, and the other one's mapped like that. But when we saw your slide on the information security example, you had just one SFIA level aligned to each one. So was that a deliberate decision in terms of being able to align it that way?
So that alignment was done. So what we did was, when we give the skill standards to people to be able to fact check for us and make sure they worked, the actual first step to that process was, this is what the RAF skill looks like, and this is the KSEB. And the next thing we would do is we would say, here's the SFIA webpage, have a look through the levels. Which level do you think is the most appropriate first level for us to start at? And so that's why on that example that we showed you, that's why that alignment was like that. That's what the 3 SMEs deemed was the appropriate level. And then our team did a secondary validation of that. Hopefully that answers that question.
There's a couple of questions, I think, just in the interest of time, maybe we lump together under the where you're going next. So we've had a question about success stories you've had regards to lateral development moves, and then there was also a question about how you are going to maintain and update the information as you go forward.
So going forward, we've got 2 skills framework managers who will be, so they will do an annual review of our framework, and then each time that SFIA, so SFIA 9, SFIA 10, etc. comes out, they will do a side-along review with that as well. They're about to start a review in February, which looks at SFIA 9 into our framework. So we'll do an annual review to ensure that it's accurate and maintained. Where are we going next? Next is just maturing our framework, having more people use it, having people get used to it, and really starting that culture change and encouraging people that a skills-based career model is actually a really positive thing, and allowing people to take control of their own journey. That's probably where we're going next, but it's maturing the framework now. This is the most important part for us, is this, we've set the foundations. Those first few bricks that we build up are happening now with people being involved.
Okay, shall we finish now? I think if we move on to the next slide, I'll just wrap things up. Okay, so you should recognize the slide from where we set off, and I guess what's really interesting here, you know, the SFIA Foundation can put together a view of how SFIA should be used, but it takes the efforts and the passion and the commitment for organizations to pick up SFIA and apply it, make it work for their organization, and deliver the benefits that they focus on and what their priorities are. So we just thought, so it's worth focusing on it's great having an idea where things can head, but you do need commitment and effort to do it. And everyone's project will look different. I think Amy and Debz characterised that, how they tried to learn from how others had approached it and the best way to do it. But you are aiming at the same types of activities in the same areas that you're focusing on. I think, was there one more? Is it just a final slide? It was, yeah. So we are very happy to talk to people, whatever stage of the journey they're at. It really helps to talk early on in your projects, as Amy and Debz did, so that we can understand and help you point in the right direction. This is not providing some consultancy and resources, providing links and ideas and suggestions to help people along the line. There's loads of information on the website to help. If you can't find what you're looking at, please get in touch. And specifically, what's really helpful is to register, so that we've got some information on our user base. It really helps to get people who are working on this. We've had other conversations that really help to build this community. We can put you in touch with people who are doing similar things that may not be in the public domain, but are available. Use the form. So I'll put another link there just in case you haven't got it. Sorry for getting a form, but that seems the best and most simple way of doing it. And you probably understand that Debz and Amy aren't able to give out their personal email addresses, but they've said if we field any questions, then we can direct them to them, and we'll try and direct it, answers back via the website or an email to everyone who's on this call. And I think that is it. I'll just say thanks very much, Debz and Amy. It's been fantastic to see your journey. We love your passion and effort around this project, and I hope it's been a real benefit for everyone who attended this to see how it's been approached. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.